Most of the beach towns on this list are not even part of Britain. They sit across the water in Ireland, and under a travel agreement older than the EU, a British citizen can move there for good, with no visa at all. To a county where a 3-bedroom house costs a fraction of what the same rooms cost in southern England, and to a headland where monks were praying before St. Patrick ever reached Ireland. To a town whose population still has not recovered from a French army that marched through it in 1798. And to a beach that once pulled 250,000 Victorian tourists a year off a single railway line. Stick around for number 1, sir, because that's the harbour where a single afternoon in 1979 changed British history, and where that same water is now one of the most respected big wave surf breaks on earth. Number 10, Kilmore Quay, County Wexford. 9 of the 10 towns on this list sit in a different country to Britain, and that's worth being straight about before we start. The common travel area between Britain and Ireland is older than the European Union, and both governments reaffirmed it in 2019 specifically so it would survive Brexit intact. A British citizen can move to any of these towns without a visa, work there without a permit, and once they count as ordinarily resident, use the public healthcare system the same as an Irish citizen would. There's no 90-day limit like the Schengen countries on the mainland. That part is simple. What isn't simple is pretending a move across the Irish Sea is the same as moving from Yorkshire to Cornwall. Because it isn't, and one town on this list is actually the exception to everything just described. We start in County Wexford on the eastern edge of Ballyteige Bay. Kilmore Quay is a working harbour where deep-sea trawlers and lobster boats have landed their catch since the early 1800s, and they still do today. In 1846, an official named Inspector General Dombrain asked the Royal National Lifeboat Institution to station a boat here, and the first one arrived on the 28th of July, 1847. Since then, the Kilmore Quay lifeboat has saved more than 100 lives, and its crews have earned 9 RNLI silver medals and 1 bronze for gallantry. That's real courage. Logged and counted, not a slogan. A permanent lifeboat station opened in 1884, and the boat itself has been moored in the marina since 2004, sitting a short walk from trawlers that still land their catch every week. Boats also run out from the quay to the Saltee Islands, a nature reserve just offshore where seabirds outnumber people by a wide margin. Here's the honest catch, because every single town on this list gets one. Kilmore Quay was built to survive the sea, not to entertain a visitor, so don't come expecting boutique shops or a long restaurant strip, because you'll find a working pub, a harbour and boats, and anyone hoping for more than that will need to look further down this list. Number 9, Enniscrone, County Sligo. Kilmore Quay's harbour is built for danger and rescue, but Enniscrone's economy is built on something people do for their health, and has been for well over a century. Enniscrone sits on Killala Bay in County Sligo, a long sandy beach town with a golf course and a campsite forming its usual draw, home to 1,291 people at the last census. A 3-bedroom semi in this part of Sligo runs somewhere between 210,000 and 220,000 euros. Read that again. That's well under half the average asking price for the same rooms in most of southern England, in a town with its own beach, its own golf course, and its own reason to exist beyond the price tag. The detail that separates Enniscrone is the Seaweed baths. The Kilcullen family bought the site in 1898 and built the current bathhouse in 1912, an Edwardian building they marketed at the time as Kilcullen's modern bathhouse to set it apart from an older one nearby. Edward Kilcullen runs the business today with his son Cain, the original founder's great-grandson, and it's now in its 5th generation of the same family. Hot seawater is drawn straight from the bay, and fresh-cut seaweed goes into the bath with you, a treatment people were using for aching joints and skin conditions long before antibiotics existed as an alternative. Nothing here needed reinventing. The building itself still looks the part, an Edwardian bathhouse with the original tiled tubs, and the steam that rolls off a full bath still smells like the tide it came from. The honest catch is timing. Enniscrone earns its keep from summer visitors and the golf crowd, and outside the season the shops thin out fast. So anyone picturing a lively high street every month of the year should picture Sligo in February instead, when the beach is empty and the baths are one of the only reasons to leave the house. Number 8. Greencastle, County Donegal. Enniscrone's Kilkullans have run the same trade for 5 generations in the Republic. But Greencastle's founder built something that changed hands within a decade of finishing it, and it's still standing 700 years later. In 1316, a Scottish invasion force led by Edward Bruce landed on the north coast of Ireland and marched on a stone fortress standing over Lough Foyle. The fortress fell and Bruce was crowned King of Ireland that same year, before losing power just months later. The castle he'd captured had only been finished 11 years earlier. That castle was Northburg Castle, built between 1301 and 1305 by Richard Ogdebourg, the Red Earl of Ulster, a Norman lord close enough to England's Edward I to have been knighted at Rhuddlan Castle in Wales. He brought that Welsh influence home with him, and the result looked like a smaller cousin of Edward's great fortresses at Caernarfon and Harlech. Bruce's capture didn't end the story. The castle reverted to de Burgh and Norman control of it held until 1333, when his grandson William, known as the Brown Earl, was murdered, and the family's grip on the northwest finally broke. It later passed into the hands of the O'Doherty clan. The ruin still stands over Lough Foyle today, beside a working fishing port that gave the village its name. A car ferry to Magilligan, running since 2002, saves drivers roughly 78 kilometres of road that would otherwise route them around through Derry. And cruise ship passengers now tender ashore, right beneath the walls a Scottish king once fought to take. The honest catch is location. Greencastle sits at the far tip of the Enniscrone Peninsula, and if that ferry isn't running, the quickest way anywhere is the long way round, so this isn't a town for anyone who dislikes being at the end of the road. Number 7. Dunfanaghy, County Donegal. Greencastle's castle took a Scottish army to capture, but Dunfanaghy's biggest building was never attacked by anyone at all, and what happened inside it was worse than any siege. Dunfanaghy sits on Sheephaven Bay, 30 kilometres northwest of Letterkenny. It grew from a fishing port into a small market town serving the farms along the N56 coastal road. In 1843, construction began on a workhouse designed by George Wilkinson, the Irish Poor Law Commissioner's own architect, the man who personally designed all 130 workhouses built across Ireland. Dunfanaghy's opened in June 1845, built to hold 300 people, at the exact moment the famine was starting to bite. It's a grim fact sitting under a pretty bay. This channel doesn't pretend history is only the flattering parts. Rather than knock the building down once it stopped being needed, the town turned it into the Dunfanaghy Workhouse Famine and Heritage Centre in 1995, and it's been open to visitors ever since. That same county now carries some of the cheapest property in Ireland, with the average Donegal house running somewhere around 185 to 195,000 euro, against a national average closer to 370,000. Read that again. A county that watched 300 people crowd into one workhouse during the famine is now one of the most affordable places in the country to buy a home outright. Today, Dunfanaghy is a small, easy town of cafes and shops looking out over Sheephaven Bay, with rugged headlands on either side and beaches that stay empty even in July. The honest catch runs the same direction as the price. Donegal has fewer general practitioners per person than most of Ireland, and rural surgeries here have had real trouble filling vacancies. So cheap and remote come as a package deal, not two separate choices, and the old workhouse is a short walk away as a reminder of what this county looked like the last time it was left to fend for itself. Number 6. Falcarragh, County Donegal. Dunfanaghy's defining building held the starving, but Falcarragh's defining fact is who owned nearly everyone else's roof across this stretch of Donegal for 300 years. Falcarragh is a small Gaeltacht town in northwest Donegal. Irish Gaelic is still the everyday language on the street here, not something performed for visitors. From 1622 to 1921, the Olfert family were the main landlords across the district, based at Ballyconnell House, and the town itself grew up mainly to house the workers and tradespeople who worked their estate. Sir John Olfert, the last of the family to hold that land, died in 1917, closing out exactly 3 centuries of Olfert ownership right as the old estate system across Ireland was falling apart for good. What's left today has nothing to do with landlords. Falcarragh Beach, also known locally as Drumnatinny, is a 7-minute drive from town and gives you more than 4 kilometres of sand, looking out toward Inishbofin and Tory Island. Tramoray Beach is quieter still, a 3-kilometre stretch you reach on a 30-minute walk through dunes, and hearing Irish spoken as an ordinary working language rather than a museum piece is what actually marks this place out from a British seaside town. Here's the honest catch, and it's simple. This coast faces straight into the Atlantic, with nothing between here and Canada. So the same wind that keeps the beaches empty and the air clean also means proper winter storms. Not the mild grey drizzle most of England calls bad weather. A town this small, in a language most visitors don't speak, will suit someone who wants to be left alone a great deal more than someone chasing company. If you're finding these towns useful, drop a thumbs up and leave a comment telling me which one you'd actually visit. Because number 5 is a town where one eccentric bishop spent a fortune building something modelled on a temple in Rome, and the National Trust still runs it today. Number 5, Castlerock, County Londonderry. Falcarragh's beaches take a half-hour walk through dunes to reach. Castlerock's beach has its own train station, and here's the twist promised at the start of this video. Unlike every town so far, Castlerock isn't in a different country at all. Castlerock sits in County Londonderry, Northern Ireland, 5 miles west of Coleraine, on the Causeway coast, served directly by the Belfast to Derry railway line. Getting there from Britain is simple. It's a normal train journey inside the United Kingdom. Nothing more complicated than that. What makes it worth including is a clergyman named Frederick Hervey, the Bishop of Derry and 4th Earl of Bristol, who between 1775 and 1785 spent a genuine fortune building downhill house and a small domed temple on the cliff above it. Hervey hired architects, including Michael Shanahan and James Wyatt, and the temple, modelled on the Temple of Vesta in Rome, was finished around 1783 as a private library and a memorial to his cousin, Frideswyd Mussenden. A fire in 1851 destroyed most of his art collection, reportedly including works by Correggio, Rubens and Tintoretto. That kind of loss would still make headlines today. The National Trust took over Mussenden Temple in the 1940s and the wider ruined estate in 1980, and they still maintain the whole clifftop site. Below it sits a 0.7-mile blue flag beach, backed by dunes and cliffs. The white dome of Mussenden Temple, visible from the sand the whole way along. The road that runs through Castlerock continues on to the Giant's Causeway a little further up the coast, one of the most internationally famous tourist stops in either country. Yet Castlerock itself still gets a fraction of those crowds. The beach has drawn Game of Thrones location scouts. They filmed a headland the Earl Bishop never lived to see, turned into a screen backdrop 2 centuries after his fire. That's the honest catch here, and it cuts the other way. Castlerock doesn't come with a bargain Irish house price or a visa-free adventure story, because you never left the UK, and being a known filming location means it's a good deal less overlooked than most places on this countdown. Number 4, Killala, County Mayo. Castlerock's beauty came from one bishop's fortune, spent across 10 years of building on a clifftop, while Killala's entire history was written by a foreign army in about 6 weeks. French soldiers landed at Kilkee on the 22nd of August, 1998. There were roughly 1,000 of them, just north of Killala, led by General Jean-Joseph Amable Humbert. And they came ashore with 3 cannon and a supply of arms before taking the town outright. They commandeered the house of Joseph Stock, the Church of Ireland Bishop of Killala, and held him prisoner inside his own home. Stock later wrote a first-hand account of what he saw, describing local recruits transformed almost overnight. The uncombed, ragged peasant who had never before known the luxury of shoes and stockings, now washed, powdered, and full-dressed, was metamorphosed into another being. Around 1,000 local farmers volunteered, 5,500 muskets were handed out, and Humbert's combined force of French troops and Irish auxiliaries marched on Castlerock. They routed a government garrison nearly twice their size, in a fight still remembered locally as the Races of Castlerock. It didn't last. The rebellion collapsed within weeks, and Killala went back to being a small service town on the same bay it had always been. It's still small. Mayo County Council's own development plan ranks it as only the 16th largest settlement in the county, describing today's Killala as a self-sustaining coastal town and commuter hub. A world away from the summer it briefly hosted a foreign army. Its population has fallen from 657 in 1996 to 562 by 2016. A slow, unremarkable decline compared to the 6 weeks in 1798 that put the town in every Irish history book. The average house price across Mayo now sits around €220,000, one of the more affordable counties on this whole list, which tells you plainly why nobody is fighting over property here. The honest catch is simple. Affordability and a shrinking population are the same story told twice here. A French army marched through, an uprising briefly held a chunk of the west of Ireland, and the town it happened in never grew back to what it was before, nor has the local job market that would need to exist to bring it back. Number 3, Kilkee, County Clare. Killala's population has been shrinking since a French army marched through it, but Kilkee's population used to swell to 15 times its normal size every single summer, entirely on purpose. Kilkee sits on Moore Bay, a natural horseshoe inlet on the County Clare coast. The Dunfanaghy Reef shelters it from the open Atlantic, and it has a 1.5 miles of blue flag beach backed by a promenade and dramatic cliffs to the north. It was a quiet fishing settlement until sea bathing became fashionable in the 1820s, and growth really took off once the West Clare Railway reached the town in 1887. At its Victorian peak, Kilkee pulled in up to 250,000 visitors a year, arriving by train to a town that had no other reason to expect them. Named visitors included the novelist Charlotte Bronte, the poet Alfred, Lord Tennyson, and Rider Haggard, the author of King Solomon's Mines. That's not tourist board spin. That's who actually came, drawn by cliffs and sea air rather than any marketing campaign. The boom faded after the First World War as rail-era mass tourism declined everywhere, and Kilkee settled into something smaller and quieter without disappearing completely. At the last census in 2022, Kilkee had 1,214 permanent residents. Every summer, that number climbs toward roughly 15,000, and the shuttered holiday homes that fill up like clockwork every July are the clearest sign left of a boom that peaked more than 100 years ago and never fully came back. The horseshoe bay that made it a safe bathing spot for Victorian visitors still does exactly that job for families today. Calm water inside the reef while the open Atlantic keeps pounding away just outside it. The honest catch follows directly from that swing. A town built for 15,000 people in August is a very different place in November, so anyone drawn here by summer photographs should picture the same promenade, half empty and windswept for most of the year, shop fronts shuttered and the cliffs to yourself, because that's Kilkee too, and it's been that way since the last Victorian train pulled out. Number 2, Ardmore, County Waterford. Kilkee's fame came from a railway built in 1887, But number two's fame predates the arrival of St. Patrick himself, years before he ever reached Ireland at all. Ardmore is a small seaside village on Ireland's south coast, built around a mile-long main beach. It's home to just 468 people at the last census. Around 430 AD, a monk named Declan founded a monastery on the headland here, years before Patrick had even reached Ireland, which makes Ardmore one of the earliest Christian settlements anywhere on the island. The round tower that still stands on the site was built in the 12th century, roughly 30 meters tall with 4 internal stories, and it's considered one of the best preserved examples in the country. Ogham stones on the same ground date back to the 5th or 6th century, and St. Declan's oratory, believed to hold the founder's own relics, was built in the 9th or 10th century. Most monastic sites this old were eventually demolished, quarried for stone, or swallowed up by a bigger town growing around them. Ardmore simply never became worth anyone's time to knock down. Nothing here needed protecting by committee. Being remote and small was the protection. The average house in County Waterford runs around €230,000, a fraction of what the same rooms would fetch within a couple of hours of London. The tower is the first thing you see approaching the village today, grey stone tapering up over rooftops. Fewer people live here than in a single large British secondary school. A monastic site with structures spanning the 5th to the 12th centuries still standing on the same headland isn't a claim most places on Earth can make. That's the honest catch. A village of 468 people, however beautiful, has a limited shop, a limited pharmacy, and a genuine distance to travel for anything beyond the basics. And St. Declan picked this headland for its isolation as much as anyone picks it today. What drew a monk here in the 5th century is the same thing that will test a retiree's patience in the 21st. Number 1. Mullaghmore, County Sligo. Ardmore's tower has kept watch over that headland for 16 centuries. Number 1 only needed one afternoon in 1979 to become part of British history, and it's spent every year since turning into something else entirely. On the morning of the 27th of August 1979, Lord Louis Mountbatten took his fishing boat out of Mullaghmore harbour. The boat was called Shadow V. His family was aboard along with a local boy named Paul Maxwell, 15 years old, working as boat hand for the summer, and the provisional IRA had planted a bomb on board overnight that detonated shortly after they left the harbour. Mountbatten was killed instantly, along with his 14-year-old grandson, Nicholas Knatchbull, and Paul Maxwell, and the Dowager Lady Brabourne died of her injuries the following day. 4 people died in a single blast. It happened in a harbour smaller than most British village car parks. Mountbatten had been summering at Classiebawn Castle, the turreted house overlooking the harbour, originally built in the 1860s for Lord Palmerston. It stood empty from 1916 until 1950, when it passed into the Mountbatten family, and that's the house he was staying in the week his boat went out for the last time. Mullaghmore itself is tiny. It had 136 year-round residents at the 2016 census, 172 by 2022. And even in summer, the numbers barely move compared to a place like Kilkee down the coast. Classiebawn Castle still stands above the village today, its turrets visible from almost every part of the harbour. It's privately owned and rarely open to the public. For years afterward, the bombing was simply what Mullaghmore was known for. A single sentence in a much bigger story about the Troubles, attached forever to a small Sligo harbour that never asked for the attention. Mullaghmore Head is the exact stretch of water where the bombing happened. It has since become one of the most respected big wave surfing locations on Earth. Professional surfers now fly in from across the world every winter to ride swells that break over the same reef, visible from the harbour where Shadow 5 launched that August morning. And the waves here are serious enough to draw people who chase the biggest swells on the planet. They arrive for the ocean, not the history. Most winters, the water below Classieborne Castle is full of surfers in wetsuits, waiting on a wave that has nothing to do with 1979, and somehow everything to do with why people still make the trip. A village of fewer than 200 people carries one castle, one harbour, and two entirely different reasons the world has heard of it. That's Mullaghmore, and that's the whole list.